Hi, I'm John and welcome to the shop. Well, today I thought I had a really exciting video to bring to everybody. Over the last couple days I've ran a carbine course twice. Once with an M1 carbine and once with my AR pistol here, and the results were actually really surprising. So I put together all the info, I brought all the video back, got it all downloaded onto my computer, thought I'd backed it up, spent some time editing it, only to find out that I had corrupted the hard drive in my computer, so alas. We're back to the beer here. Shiner Bock, good stuff, by the way. So instead of wallowing in my, misery here, I thought I'd talk about something else that, I've always kind of been interested in. It's kind of my love-hate relationship with these Ruger P series pistols. So I pulled one out of the safe, and I thought we'd talk about it a little bit. Just kind of see where it takes us. First off, everything I've got here, I have no ammo out here in the shop. I'm going to show you a handful of guns here. They're all unloaded and safety checked, and you'll see me safety check them again. So don't need to put down there in the comments. I know I've got some beer around, but I'm a responsible adult, and this is my own house, and I'm the only one home. So it is what it is. I actually have a lot of history with these P-Series Rugers, and I'll do some close-ups later so we can go over some of the details. I really just want to talk about the merits of these guns in 2021. So if you were to go to the pawn shop and find one of these Ruger, P85, Mark IIs, the P89s, P90s, whatever it may be, are they still viable in today's market? And if you don't want to watch the whole rest of the video, for the money, if you can get one of these for, say $200, these are probably still pretty decent guns. Just be aware they've got some quirk. So if you can deal with some of those quirks, then by all means, a lot of folks really enjoy these, and I think these will be collectible in the future. Really more based on kind of the weirdness of the whole thing than their competitiveness with some other similar pistols. So when I try to describe these pistols, especially the early ones, the 85s, P85s, and P89s, to people, I always kind of say, it's almost like the engineers at Ruger had seen a Sig P220 and the Beretta 92. I don't believe it was the FS was out yet, but they'd seen those pistols and they'd, taken a mental picture of it, and they'd gone back to, presumably Prescott, Arizona, because all these are castings, and then they just made one from memory. Because they're kind of a bastardized child. They kind of share some of the same features as all the other guns of those eras, and we'll kind of discuss that a little bit more. So what actually kicked off and led to the development of the P-Series Rugers, if we were to travel all the way back to like the late 70s and early 80s, the military, through an act of Congress, it's a big long story, but basically they determined that they needed, instead of having like 25 different pistols, it was mandated to all the branches of the armed forces that, hey guys, you just need to settle on one firearm to rule them all. So they kicked off what became like the XM9 trials. I'm not a military historian, but sometime there in the early 80s, like 82, 83, the details are a little hazy and lost to time, unless you're really into that sort of thing. Basically, the call went out to all these manufacturers and said, hey, this is what we're looking for. We need a gun that's more durable, or more durable than the 1911. Now, this is a kind of a tricked-out Kimber TLR2 that Bill at Cylinder and Slide did some work to, but this is a good shooting gun. But basically, they wanted to replace these guns, these single stack 45, 7-round capacity. They were all old. There were still a lot of World War II era guns in the inventories with a new double stack, double action, single action 9mm. Ultimately, we all know the M9, the Beretta 92 series, ended up winning that contract. Not once, but actually twice, kind of. And that's kind of where the Ruger comes in. So the Ruger P85, kind of the granddaddy, like one generation removed from this guy here. This happens to be a P89. I think Bill Ruger decided, like, hey, this contract is something that we could win. Even if we didn't win it, it'd be really good for our gun to go through these service trials, because there'll be a lot of other police forces that are going to look at these trial numbers, and they're going to determine what they're going to buy for the, municipality police forces, state police, that sort of thing. This was kind of the beginning of the end for the duty service revolvers, at least in the United States. So these Wonder 9s, as they're colloquially called, the 80 pistols, the double stack 9s, kind of took over. And really by the early 90s, Glock had really entrenched itself in the duty belts of a lot of police forces all over the United States. So I know I'm bouncing around here, but if we go back with this Ruger here, this P89, Bill Ruger, I think, decided in like 83 or 84, like, hey, we should get in on this. We can build guns, and we can build them cheaper and more durable than anybody else. So there's some interesting design that go into these, and we'll take one of these apart later, and we'll take a look just real briefly at them. So they did. They started in-house designing their own double stack 9mm that actually, at least from afar, this Sig P226 here, really it has about all the same features minus the safety, which you could get it without later. You could get a decocker only Ruger. Really has all about the same features as this. They're just different. So at their heart, Ruger really is a casting company. That is what they're really good at, is casting frames. Really, they revolutionized the industry in a lot of ways. They can make a very economical pistol from a casting instead of a forging. But there really are some trade-offs. And I know this isn't going to come across on camera. I'll do some close-ups later. But when you get a casting, you can make a casting just as strong as a forging. I mean, Ruger's proven that. This thing is a freaking tank. This thing would survive getting run over by a pickup truck. However, in order, for it to be just as strong as a forged or fully machined frame, they just have to be a little thicker, and these are just not the most ergonomic guns. So it took Ruger longer, I think, than they anticipated to, from the ground up, design their first high-capacity autoloading pistol. The P85 nomenclature, you'd think it came out in 1985, but I believe it actually came out in 1987. So it completely missed the XM9 trials. However, Sig, they kind of whined about the XM9 trials and said, hey, this wasn't fair. We clearly won. If you're really interested in that sort of thing, you can go back and look into it. There really is a case to be made that the 226 probably really won the trials, but ultimately military pistols are not really important in war. Having gone multiple times myself, pistols really don't make or break an army or an Air Force or a Navy or the Marine Corps. So Beretta was really able to undercut Sig on price, and I think that was part of the reason why they got the contract and Sig didn't. So there was this big cry of cheaters and this underhanded business, but really it came down to price. So the United States military decided to do what they called the XM10 trials, and then I guess just to spite the U.S. military after they had this big fuss, Sig didn't even submit a pistol. And Beretta was like, well, we already won these trials. Like, we shouldn't need to submit a pistol, right? Like, we clearly won this trial. So it was really kind of strange what the participants were for the XM10 trials. And they took place in like 87 or maybe early 88 at Fort Benning. Ruger was very excited to submit a pistol. I think Smith & Wesson had to be coerced into sending, I believe they sent 459s. And even then, the testing procedure could not have been the same between the two trials, because there were some, like the reliability and durability trials that the Smith did fine in 1985, but they did terrible in 1987. I don't know. The whole thing, I think the military had already made up their mind, and no matter what happened, the Beretta was going to win again. Like, they'd already determined that they were going to spend X amount of dollars to get X amount of pistols. But Ruger submitted their pistol, the P85. Not really sure why it was not selected. I don't think anyone, at least in any literature I've ever looked at, there's not really like a smoking gun, pardon the pun, of why Ruger's pistol was rejected. But I can guess ergonomics had something to do with it. So Ruger had this pistol that I think technically surpassed the reliability for the XM10 trials. And they immediately tried to get like state police agencies. And there were a few that jumped on board. I believe like Wisconsin. They ultimately lost New Jersey. H&K ended up getting New Jersey. But there were a handful of fairly big agencies that kind of jumped on board with the P85. And then they had the biggest recall in auto pistol history at that time. So if we took a look, this is not a P85. This is a P89, kind of the updated. But they work exactly the same, so I'm just going to use this as a placeholder. So just like in the Berettas, we've got the gun, it's on fire, hammer's back, presumably we already fired a shot. we dropped down the safety, which is also the decocker. There were a few instances with a broken transfer bar where the Ruger P85 would fire, would send a round through. So Ruger, of course, offered to recall all the guns, or they sent this big recall out for all of the guns. I believe they still do that recall today. So if you have a Ruger P85 and you would like it to get the Mark II updates, you can go and send it in. I believe they still fix them. And this is just called the P89. So I assume the year was 1989. I don't think they really hit the shelves till like 1990, 1991. So this is a 1992 vintage gun. Actually in remarkably good shape, all things considered. You will note, if you buy any of these guns of that vintage Ruger, the slides have some weird bluing issues. I think it was a bluing salts issue at the factory. But any of the guns from like 88 through maybe 94 or 95, they'll get this reaction where they kind of turn purple. And I don't know how well that's showing up on camera, but this one kind of has a little bit of purpling haze going on. It kind of looks okay. I mean, I really don't mind it too much. These are an investment cast frame. They are chunky. If you look online on any forum anywhere, they're going to say, oh man, those big, blocky, bulky Ruger P-Series guns, they're so heavy. They're really not that heavy. So unloaded, I weighed this inside, 34.2 ounces with no magazine in it. In this 226, this happens to be a 40, so maybe a little lighter just because there's less material in the barrel than a 9mm. I believe this was 0.3 of an ounce heavier, but it does also have the accessory rail. So it's pretty much a wash. It's honestly, these Rugers are honestly not heavy guns at all for what they are, of the vintage they are, until you start comparing them to the polymer frame guns. I believe a Glock 17 like this Gen 3, I don't know that I weighed this, but they generally cited it at around 25 ounces. So it's significant. 9 ounces is quite a bit. And this Glock 17 came with 17 round magazines standard. The Ruger, of course, 15 round magazines were the standard when these shipped. But in today's day and age, Mech-Gar makes 17 round magazines that are also flush fit. So I believe if these P-Series guns were more popular in today's shooting world, you'd see 18 and 19 round magazines just because these magazines are the right dimension. But of course, there's not a lot of incentive for a magazine company to invest in the infrastructure and tooling to produce an 18 round Ruger P-Series magazine, assuming it's a 9. 1994, the assault weapons ban passed here in America, limited all of these guns here to 10 rounds. Ruger really shifted their focus at that time to producing 45 ACP guns and 40. So it wasn't as big of a magazine hit. So I believe the P92 and the P94-4, the 40 Smith & Wesson Rugers, like the police and military only magazines held 12 rounds. And then of course the mags that went to the rest of us were all 10 rounders. So that wasn't as big of a hit. So I think the 40s and 45s, based on this platform gun, became much more popular. All right, so I'm going to bring the camera around here to a little different angle, and I'm going to show kind of disassembly and what we're talking about here, and just some more features of the gun. More of a compare and contrast with kind of some of the other guns that were in its weight class back in the day. So bear with me, I've got to look through the viewfinder of the camera to do this, but I will just touch on disassembly just because it is a little counterintuitive. All right, so first thing we're going to do is obviously remove the magazine. This particular model does not have a magazine disconnect, but I believe Ruger made some specifically for the foreign markets for Mexico, where they also made a 30 Luger barrel, drop-in barrel for this guy, which is kind of interesting. So we're going to make sure the gun's clear, press the ejector down. All right, now we're going to depress the slide back. There's a notch in the frame here. Kind of, there we go. And then this slides apart. You can see how substantial, maybe you can't up against the background here, but this aluminum casting, it's quite bulky, but it's actually fairly light. I'm not sure what the special herbs and spices that they use to make this aluminum casting, but it's not as dense as a fully machined aluminum frame for sure. So I'm not sure what else is in there. It does have this link setup, just like a 1911 would. Non-captured recoil spring. But the lockup is actually quite a bit more like a SIG. I said in the intro that it was like somebody had seen a SIG 220, maybe after having a few beers in Germany or Switzerland, but they did not really, it's not as well refined. So this is a very beefy slide. So of course, with the recoil of 9mm, the recoil spring is not very heavy at all. So very light recoil spring. I don't know what the weight is, but it's not very substantial at all. So that's one of those things about when firing this gun is it has like this ka-chug, I guess the best way I can describe it, feeling that, the small 9mm round, does not really have a whole lot of slide velocity on something like this. And then the recoil spring just kind of pushes it back forward into battery. So this is a weird thing where these guns are incredibly reliable. However, they're apparently very prone to limp wristing. So putting it together, just the reverse here. Slide our captive slide stop back in, and then you can either reach in and pop up the ejector, or you can just insert an empty magazine, and then this gun is ready to go. While I've got you in close, I was going to show you, this is not the decocker only model. This is just the standard double action, single action. If I was going to carry one of these, which I wouldn't, but if I was going to, I would opt for the decocker only model. So it was a little more manual of arms, kind of like a SIG. But so if we had this gun in fire, this trigger pull here, pretty long and heavy, a lot of stacking right at the end, and then that hammer drops. This is way over what my Lyman trigger pull gauge will go to. If I had to guess, I'd say 12 to 13 pounds in double action. It's not the worst double action trigger pull of all time, but it's certainly not the best. So if we're going along with our simulation here, this big heavy slide just kind of slumbers back, go back into battery. The single action pull is strange. So I'm sure you heard that click. It's kind of like the first stage, and then we hit this wall, and then we hit kind of like another wall. I don't know. I would say I could get the gauge out, but I'm fairly certain that it's going to be in the 7 to 8 pound range. So not exactly a crisp trigger. If we're all done shooting, we want to make this gun safe. We can depress this decocker, which is, so it's pretty much impossible for somebody with my size hands at least to perform this task without really changing my grip. Positive is that even from 1985, this is truly as close to an ambi gun as you were going to find in the 80s. So the magazine release, it's kind of an odd setup here. It's kind of a push forward affair, but it is ambi. The safety / decocker is also ambi. So the slide stop, of course, is only on the left hand side of the gun, the way God intended. So lefties are kind of out of luck there, but the rest of this gun, pretty good in those regards. Not the most ergonomic grip in the world. Just a big, almost like holding on to a 2x4. I feel like if Ruger were to go back in time and slim this up and just take all the meat out, this could be a pretty excellent grip. It does suffer from a fairly high bore axis, but really it's the wide grips that just make it really difficult for me personally to really enjoy shooting these guns. If we contrast that, SIG, which we already talked about, weighs almost the exact same. Just from an ergonomic standpoint, like everything's where I can reach it. If this slide is racked here and I wanted to decock it, I got to break my grip a little bit, but I could always throw on the slim grips if I wanted to. Just everything's set up better on the SIG. It has a better feel in the hand. However, in the 80s, this was a $500 gun, and this was a $225 gun. So Ruger, it's like 90% is good, maybe ergonomically, but not quite half the price. So that was really their selling feature. I'm going to move the camera. We'll talk about it a little bit more here. So one more thing I want to touch on real quickly is reliability as far as just going bang every time you drop the hammer. This thing is amazing. No complaints there. They are known to be tanks, and they truly are. especially a 9mm. They're just way overbuilt for 9mm. However, one of the Achilles heel of this design is, I mentioned it earlier about this really, really heavy slide, this really light recoil spring. They kind of have a reputation for being a really easy gun to limp wrist. And I haven't really experienced that myself, but it's definitely out there. But I have run into in a P85 Mark II, and this was a high mileage gun. You know, this was a police gun, so it had seen a lot of use over the years. The recoil spring had worn out, and I could just shake the gun out of battery. So it was not a reliable piece, but you know, 13, 14 bucks to Wolf Springs, you know, got that one fixed back up and no issues. So other than that, like I said, the more desirable option would be the decocker only. I've looked into converting these to decocker only before, and I thought it would just be like a lot of guns where it's a simple modification. However, on the Rugers, the slides are actually different, so it's not as easy or straightforward. Your only real option is to purchase a decocker only slide and then change a few bits on the frame to make it a decocker. So I think that really takes away quite a bit from the usability. One thing I forgot to touch on earlier, and I don't know why, because this is kind of a major complaint of mine about this series of guns, is the sights. As far as I know, at least through the P92, this 3-dot sighting system that was kind of in vogue in the 80s and early 90s, you can see on this particular model here, I don't know how well that's going to show up on camera, but I have blacked out the rear and I painted the entire front post red with a paint marker, and that really does help. Accuracy, I'm not the world's best pistol shot, but I'm far from the worst. And I enjoy going back to the, you know, about 50-yard line and plinking. And from that 50-yard line, I'd wager that I could probably hit 50% of the time on a 10-inch plate. So way worse than just about any other modern 9mm gun. Now, once again, let's harken back. These sights suck. They do make some aftermarket high-vis sights. You can buy them. They're fairly cheap, even on eBay. There's some fiber optic options. Even on eBay, you could buy them. But I'm really not too interested in investing, you know, 50, 60 bucks in a new set of sights, you know, for a gun like this. So I keep these around. I've got a couple of them. When I teach concealed carry classes, I usually have one of these just to kind of show people how a double action, single action works. And you know, it's not uncommon for somebody to have one of these. You know, maybe they were mildly interested in guns in the 80s and 90s, and, you know, maybe this is their only gun. They're really not terrible options for home defense. I would not really consider any of the P-Series Rugers to be really good carry guns. And if you were going to go that route and you had dead set, you were going to carry a, you know, one of the smaller, the compact size P-Series, try to get the decocker only, because this is just a really awkward system to run with their safety wings, the way they've got it set up. So I wouldn't say it's mandatory, but if it was me doing it, I would find a decocker only model and I would run that, or hell, even the double action only. I'd feel better equipped in a gunfight with the double action only versus something where I may accidentally engage the safety on this guy. And that's one of the drawbacks. It's really difficult to find good holsters for these. I found this. This works on pretty much all the Ruger P-Series guns, all the double stack 9s, all the way up to the SR series. This is like a cheapo belt. I don't know, it's like 30 bucks on eBay. This is what I'll bring these to classes, and I'll kind of let people, you know, if they want to, they can shoot this gun. Certainly not going to damage the resale value on these. These are still relatively cheap, $250 and down. The decocker models probably another 50 bucks. They're definitely more desirable than the standard safety model, but they're available and they're all over the place. Ruger made a ton of these. A lot of these were police guns, but like I said, the only real options for holsters, unless you're going to have a custom one made, are to buy like one of these cheap holsters, molded holsters off of like eBay or Amazon, or there are quite a few used, like the basket weave, you know, like police belt style holsters. Those really aren't the best, especially for concealed carry. So you're kind of limited on options there. So one thing that got brought up in the last concealed carry class, the guy asked me, he's like, hey, what is your philosophy of use when it comes to these handguns, you know, because I always bring a bunch of them. And I was kind of taken aback because I really never thought about it. You know, I have my carry gun, you know, maybe like I go to war. But philosophy of use, you know, I was like, ah, man, I've heard that discussed as far as service pistols before. It turns out, you know, there's some other popular YouTubers that kind of discuss that more in depth. And they honestly might be more of an authority when it comes to those terms. So I kind of thought about it a little bit. And I said, you know what, there is one really good use for these Ruger P series guns besides just range toys. And I'll show you here. So I am not like the world's leading authority on prepping or anything like that, but I always like to be prepared. And one of the things I thought about in, you know, worst case scenario, society breakdown, is I've kind of grappled with the thought that, hey, you know what, maybe I need to arm another person. So just as far as force multipliers go, yeah, it's great if I'm out there and, you know, inside my truck, you know, I have an AR pistol in my everyday carry gun. But, you know, at some point, if things really got sideways and I was away from my home, it might not be a terrible idea to at least have the ability to arm another person. So I won't get too much into that because I think that's kind of outside the scope of this review. But this is my philosophy of use for this style gun. So I carry this around in my truck with a bunch of other stuff. And inside of it, not showing up particularly well, but inside of it, I've got this Ruger P89 with a 17-round magazine, 2 more 17-round magazines, and then once again, just this cheap belt holster. Because I think this is a good option for this, because if somebody did break into my truck, and I live in rural Nebraska, so the odds of that happening are probably pretty low, and they did take this P-Series Ruger, this, you know, $200 pistol, it wouldn't be the end of the world. Like, obviously I don't want to arm a criminal, but I wouldn't be nearly as upset if this got stolen versus this 1911 that Cylinder and Slide worked over. You know, just the price loss difference, $200 versus, you know, $2,500, you know, I could stomach the $200 loss. But if I did have to arm another person, it's a good, reliable gun. It's stupid easy to use. And it, you know, I've got the whole system there. So I've got 3 magazines, a holster, and they could throw another 2 magazines in their pockets, and, you know, maybe we could fight our way home, or whatever needed to happen. So I won't get too in depth into that. If somebody's really interested, maybe I could talk about that, like the pros and cons of, you know, having your plan be to arm another person. But I've just thrown it out there. But if we were just to talk about my philosophy of use for some of these older guns that really don't fall into like my everyday carry rotation, I enjoy having them. I enjoy shooting them on the range. But if I had to press it into service, it wouldn't be as my primary defense gun. But if somebody else, hey, if they weren't prepared and all they had was a Ruger P89, well, better than a sharp stick. All right, so kind of as a recap, this is my Ruger P89. They're pretty decent guns. They're definitely a product of their time. You could tell that this gun was developed in the 1980s. There is actually some cool features, mainly manufacturing. Not very ergonomic. The safety setup's not real good, but they are incredibly reliable, assuming the recoil spring doesn't get weak on you. I've never had an issue with these. They'll run forever. There are a plethora of magazines and other options available for them because this gun was just produced for so long. The P89, I believe, didn't actually stop being manufactured until like 2007 or 2008. These soldiered on for quite a while, and some of the other P-Series guns, kind of the last iteration, the P345? Yeah, the 45 model. I mean, they made that gun up until just 6-7 years ago. So they really had a good run from, you know, the P85 came out in 1987 all the way to like 2013, 2014. That's a good run for one model of guns. I believe these were phased out. Ruger came out with the SR series of pistols, and they are nothing to write home about either, but they have some advantages maybe over these Ruger guns, but I don't know. These nostalgia is strong with these for me, but it's on a case-by-case basis. No comparison. The Sig here, this 226, just quality, pride of ownership, accuracy, accessories, everything about the Sig, which I feel is probably the closest example to the Ruger P series guns. Definitely superior. And then as far as an actual, for like police, obviously the Glocks, this being Glock 17, but really any of them, Glock 17, Glock 19, really just for capacity, they came in at about the same price. These dominated for a reason. So, all right, well that pretty much wraps it up for me. I hope you enjoyed this. Sorry it was so long since my last video. Life got in the way, and then I was so excited to do my M1 carbine course that I'm just so frustrated that I lost that video footage. Luckily though, since I do still kind of work part-time at a range, I'll probably be able to run this course again sometime in the spring, because it really was interesting. So I hope that this kind of was a good stopgap in the meantime. If you have any comments, questions, anything I could be doing better, please leave a comment. Subscribe too. I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos. I didn't realize subscriptions, how heavily they would impact how many people actually get to see my videos. So if you did enjoy this, go ahead and hit the subscribe too. I'd appreciate that. And I've got some other videos planned, hopefully coming up here in the next few weeks. So thanks for stopping by the shop. I really appreciated it, and I will talk to you later. Have a good night.